What's up? It's your boy Kevin to turn on this motherfucking YouTube shit. Wow, what the
fuck? What's up? It's your boy Kevin to turn on YouTube shit. Hey man, say man, we are Leadin, man. Turn. Tell you to one free day. Jay here outside. Big crip and gang shit outside, shit, man. Free Palestine, free Congo, Russia, your thing, and Texas stand the fuck up. Each day is a be a better version of yourself. Never let someone bring that also back. Never let someone tell you who you are, but also never put yourself in the position of alone. Let's stay humble. Let's get a revolution on the movement. Keep y'all right first. Coming to the Black Hebrew Israelite as a real Jew. We out here. Alright. Boom. Today, 2 free day. Jay here outside. Big crip and gang shit outside, shit, man. Turn up. And the gang go. Bruh, man, this is sad because, you know, when people at the height of their music career or at the back end of their music career, man, a lot of people, man, don't understand how crazy it is in the moments when you're at the top of your career and when you're at the back of your career. Because this type of industry system that we live in, man, they will use you up until you like a dried banana. You know what I'm saying? They will use every last type of vitamin they can get out of you. And they will, once they get everything out of you, man, they'll toss you to the side like a piece of motherfucking plastic. And so we got Michael Jackson, man, one of the best to ever do it. So we got valid proof that they took out Michael Jackson. You know what I'm saying? A lot of the world said, oh, we don't know if he took him out, doctor this, doctor that. But now we see with these Epstein files coming out that Michael Jackson, man, they played with him before he got taken out, man. They took him out because, you know, he was exposing the truth. So we got this proof that came out, and it's going to be a breakdown of what's happening in the doctor. Let's get through it.
What's wrong, Michael?
I don't know if I should tell you this, but I don't know who may be listening. There may be a group of people that want to get rid of me. They don't want me here anymore.
I don't understand. What do you mean? Talk to me.
I can't talk about it over the phone. I don't know what's going to happen, but I just feel in my soul, only God knows, they could shoot me, they could stab me, they could frame me and say I overdosed you with drugs. They can do a lot of things.
Who could do these things?
So this proves that Michael Jackson was taken out. Celebrity memory.
My shoulder is dislocated, literally. It's hurting me very badly. I'm in pain all the time. See this arm, this as far as I can reach.
The most profound and harrowing secret of the entertainment industry, one that once left Mike. Michael Jackson, trembling with apprehension, is now slowly coming into light. A somber, suffocating truth, powerful enough to send shockwaves across the globe when one
They took
realizes
him out,
it was
man.
the very thing that pulled him into the greatest tragedy of his life. Behind the overwhelming glare of the stage lights, he was forced to confront intangible burdens, subtle conflicts, and shadows no one dared to name. This is not merely the story of a legend. It is the agonizing cry of a soul pushed to its absolute breaking point. Before we delve deep into this secret, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the haunting truth that lies beneath.
They were trying to control him and take all his money on
No one
everything he
could have
got.
ever imagined that a man living amidst the dazzling spotlight, surrounded by a hurricane of cheers, could whisper in the darkest corner of his own life a phrase that sounds like a jest but sends a chill down the spine. They're trying to kill me. That sentence wasn't a press statement. It wasn't recorded in any official document. It only surfaced through scattered accounts from the crew who worked with him and from acquaintances who recounted the moment Michael Jackson looked down
And now we got
at
the
his
proof.
gently
It was
shaking
on the Epstein
hands
files.
as if he himself couldn't believe what he had just said. Yet that utterance, whether it was a tired confession or merely a sigh overheard by chance, carved a lasting, deep scar. What could possibly compel a man of such monumental stature to utter such a phrase? In this profession, everyone knows that no place is entirely luminous. The entertainment industry is not the velvet soft red carpet
At
people
all.
imagine. Internally, it resembles a labyrinth where individuals are ground down by expectations, contracts, and the unwritten rules.
They'll build
no one
you up
dares
just to break you down.
articulate. Michael was no exception. In his final years, he was drawn into a fearsome, relentless vortex to such an extent that even those who once worked closely with him confessed something was fundamentally wrong, deeply wrong. Not because he was frail, but because everything around him became utterly stifling. The protracted rehearsals, the layers of conflicting agreements, the looming financial responsibilities hanging over his head, all merged into a crushing pressure that left him only a tiny pocket of air to breathe. But what makes this narrative even more complex and poignant lies at a deeper level. Michael had lived his entire life in a body that carried the skin tone of a community that had endured profound inequity. Though he was universally loved and his talent was revered, there were still eyes within the industry that viewed him with half admiration, half wariness. An invisible distance he had gently acknowledged in several interviews. Those sensitive to the subtleties recognized how exhausting this was for him. To stand on the global stage, he had to not only sing, dance, and create, but also to resist the prejudices, subtly embedded within the deepest layers of popular culture. It wasn't something spoken aloud, but it was something he felt every day, in every fiber of his being. It was this very conflict between unrivaled glory on one side and devastating solitude on the other that made the fear embedded in the phrase,
He
"You're trying
knew
to
too
kill
much,
me,"
nigga.
so profoundly thought-provoking. It
Simple.
wasn't the fear of specific individuals,
And he
but a
owned
kind
too
of
much
vague
shit in
dread,
the industry.
a feeling of being pushed
True.
into a corner when his life no longer offered any retreat. Close associates recalled
He
that
called
Michael
out
was
Clive Davis
frequently
and
more
all the
vigilant
fucking
than usual.
scammy ass
He no
people.
longer trusted easily.
Scums.
He was engulfed by his schedule, by endless meetings, by the intense pressure of the comeback expectation. But exactly what he feared, whom he saw in that shadow, no one knew. And perhaps the most terrifying element was precisely that, the ambiguity that made everything overwhelmingly frightening. Many public records from this period show that Michael had virtually no time for himself. He was submerged in work preparing for This Is It, a project so massive that the breath of the entire world seemed to be resting upon his shoulders. No one denied that he wanted to return, wanted to shine one last time. But those present in the rehearsal rooms recounted moments when he was so utterly spent that he had to sit down, burying his head in his hands. No shouting, no complaints, just a moment of heavy silence that unsettled everyone who witnessed it. A choreographer once heard his voice, barely a whisper, sounding like he lacked the air to speak. This pressure is too much. Although no written document confirms it, that account was passed from person to person, a faint yet agonizing detail. All of these elements coalesced into a truth that everyone could sense intuitively.
They use you
Michael
up till
was
they
being
can't use you
stretched
no
to
more.
his absolute limit. And when a person is pushed to the edge like that, every emotion becomes vulnerable and
He
fragile.
was 50, man.
The
He been putting
anxiety, the
he
immense
put that
pressure,
work in
and
for
even the
years,
phrases
nigga, ever
uttered
since a little
unconsciously
kid.
took on a darker shade than normal. What makes this story particularly unique is the strange dichotomy. Ahead of him was a colossal stage waiting to be illuminated, yet behind him was a frayed soul, struggling between the magnitude of humanity's expectations and his own inherent fragility. The industry demanded he shine, but the silent void in his mind was widening to a degree that made anyone who saw it feel a profound sorrow. If one speaks of the industry secret, the topic of many rumors later on, this period was the very source of all the speculation. It wasn't a secret in the cinematic, dark conspiracy sense. Sometimes the industry's secret lies not in a specific plot, but in the way people are utilized to the point of complete exhaustion simply to keep the machine running. Many people in the industry whispered to each other that Michael was placed in a position where he could not stop, that his schedule was too dense for someone burdened by prolonged fatigue to bear. But all of this was rumor. No one dared to confirm it. The only thing verified was the pressure was undeniably real. Also during this time, close friends related that he would occasionally look around the room as if trying to find something wrong. It wasn't a startle of fright, but the feeling of someone who had endured too much pain, too many experiences
He got backstabbed so many damn times.
That was also when the phrase, "they're trying to
They made
kill
all
me,"
these laws
was
on him
repeated
and
most often.
backstabbed him.
Not because it was recorded, but because it reflected a mindset stretched taut like a bowstring. A
Then he
soul
started
as
pulling out
deeply
his own
sensitive
eyes,
as
nigga.
his, when
Y'all think y'all
surrounded
gonna
by
backstab
pressure,
me, the
could
industry?
easily
He
perceive
started throwing
everything as a
daggers at
shadow
them,
larger
pointing them
than
out.
its true nature.
And they got mad at
The
him.
most heartbreaking point is this. Regardless
They
of where
ruined his
that
career.
phrase originated,
Because he started exposing
regardless
them
of what
niggas.
he was referring to,
He crackers.
it was still the sign of a man who felt utterly alone within the very world he once commanded. And it was that very solitude that constituted the greatest contradiction of his life. A man adored by millions, yet with barely anyone who truly understood the thin, brittle glass of his soul. Amidst the still-charged atmosphere of the rehearsal room, intensified by every dance move, a larger, heavier conflict smoldered over Michael. He stood there at the epicenter of everything, yet felt as though he was being dragged forward by unseen hands that no one else could perceive. The entertainment industry called it process, commitment, preparation. But to Michael, it felt like icy shackles tightening their grip, little by little. No one needed to say it aloud. He understood that behind every light was a cascade of obligations, forcing him to advance, even as his body and mind were utterly spent. Those close to him during this period described Michael as frequently appearing lost in
Yeah, they
thought,
wore that nigga
as if
Michael
trying
Jackson
to find
down.
an escape route in a maze he never wanted to enter.
He
This
couldn't
is,
leave.
it was intended as the
The
greatest
FBI, the
comeback
secret
of his career.
organization, on his
Yet
ass
many recalled
anywhere he
moments
goes.
when he would stare at the schedule and
They
fall
have all
into
these
a
random
heavy,
ass people around him. He don't know who
indescribable
these people are.
silence, as if a single deep breath would be enough to shatter
You
the
get what I'm
mountain
saying?
of
All these, who's
accumulated
these random
pressure.
ass people? He don't know.
The
I'm
jam-packed
pretty sure Michael
rehearsal
Jackson know all these
schedule,
niggas.
the demands for peak
You know
performance,
what I'm saying?
the immense financial commitments, coupled with his need to prove that he could still electrify the
Handlers and
stage,
shit, watching him and
all
shit.
merged into a sound that was taut like a drum skin. Many rumors circulated in the industry that he was put in a position where he could not stop.
He couldn't.
That even if he was tired enough to lean against a wall, he had to continue.
Yeah, the team.
These are just rumors with no official documentation to prove them. Yet those who interacted with
Maybe
him
he
recall
found only
details that
peace
were
in
chilling
what
to hear,
in performing,
such as
but
the
his
moment
body
he
couldn't take
quietly
it no
asked
more,
a crew
man.
member if he could cut
They
down on
took
a
him
few
out,
rehearsal
man.
sessions.
It's like, oh, you
His
can't
voice
perform
so
for us no
soft,
more?
it almost
You're no
dissolved
good
into
for
the
us.
air.
You gotta go.
It was
Cause I know
relayed that
Michael
his
Jackson would have
eyes at the
tell all
time
after
looked as
after
though he was begging
what's
for
the
a
show?
moment's
This is it.
respite,
He
rather
would have
than
tell
asking
all.
for a schedule
You
change.
have to get that nigga out the paint.
What made this story even more dramatic was the contrast in how the industry treated him.
Trip.
Michael was simultaneously seen as a legend and a commodity.
You go.
One side elevated him with countless accolades, the other expected him to shoulder a colossal block of responsibility. This very gap created an enduring tug of war, as if Michael was being torn into two pieces, one for the audience and one desperately trying to hold on to something for himself. Tension escalated as the open secrets of the entertainment industry began to reveal themselves. Not secrets in the sense of a dark conspiracy, but the unspoken implicit rules that everyone in the business understood. If you want to stand on the stage, you have to sacrifice more than outsiders can imagine. A director who once collaborated with Michael recalled that no artist is allowed to run out of energy, even for a moment. That statement sounds ordinary, but placed in the context of Michael trying to stand
See,
firm
Michael Jackson
while close
grew
to
up in this
exhaustion,
shit. He thought all
it
this shit
became
was
pressure
normal.
layered upon
I
pressure.
was looking on the outside
An
in like,
internal
nigga, this
source
not
once
normal.
shared
Y'all, they
that
killing
there
this
was
nigga.
a
They
time
draining
when
this nigga
Michael
drunk.
practically lived in 3 states: rehearsing,
He couldn't
meeting, and
retire
worrying.
nothing really.
He ate less, slept less, and smiled less.
And if he
The
did was at the
moments he
crib, they
did
was trying to take him
smile,
out the
if any,
crib.
carried a forced quality, like a person compelled to appear fine so that everything around them wouldn't collapse. This led several crew members to worry, whispering among themselves, "He's not well?" No one dared to say it outright, because doing so meant confronting a truth that no one was ready to accept. It was also during this period that the phrase, "they're trying to kill me," began to haunt the narrative like an apparition. An assistant once recounted that Michael said the phrase during a moment of intense strain, his voice sounding weary, as if on the verge of surrender. No one knows exactly what he was pointing to: contractual pressures, the schedule, his profound loneliness, or years of smoldering emotional wounds. All are possibilities. But what made the statement so profoundly disturbing was the way it came out.
Is that his
Spontaneous,
brother,
choked,
Jesse Jackson?
and full of alarm, as if he had sensed something that outsiders could not see. Even if it was only an indirect, unverified account, in that circumstance, it sent shivers through the listener.
The thing is, if Michael Jackson had social media back in the day when he was doing all this, man, it would have been up.
Those in the know
Michael
suggested
Jackson would have
that
told
behind their
everything. We
title
would have been
was a
knowing
man
every
who had to
fucking thing
fight
that was
against a
going on, bro.
multitude of prejudices. Though he reached global heights, there persisted layers of harsh scrutiny directed at an artist who grew up in a community that had suffered historical inequity. No one spoke of it directly, but it formed a layer of invisible pressure that a sensitive person like Michael
It's kind of
felt
crazy how the
acutely.
industry changed this nigga, man.
That was the conflict that constantly kept his mind hovering on the fragile boundary between trust and self-defense. A detail few people knew, and this is a fascinating point recounted by many in the crew, was Michael's habit of taking a few steps back after every crowded meeting. He wouldn't leave immediately, wouldn't say more, but would simply step back and stand still for a few seconds, as if checking whether he had just exited a safe room or a room full of traps. A minor action, yet it spoke volumes. Longtime observers believed it was his way of self-soothing, a kind of survival ritual to cope with the industry's intangible pressures. The cruel irony is that precisely because he was Michael Jackson, the man the entire world focused its eyes on, it became even harder for him to find a place to lean on. Every step he took was monitored, every decision was analyzed, every sign of fatigue caused hundreds of plans behind the scenes to tremble in response. In that atmosphere of tension, the phrase, "they're trying to kill me," became even sharper because it reflected a feeling of being pushed to the very bone. If the first chapter was the whisper of apprehension, this part is when those invisible chains began to tighten their grip to the point that the reader also feels suffocated. And that is only the surface of this chapter. What comes next? What rushed toward Michael like a silent yet powerful wave, strong enough to sweep away every support, that awaits dissection in the following section. When the rehearsal room door closed, Michael was no longer the legend. He was just himself, an exhausted body, a mind constantly on high alert, and a soul trapped between two worlds. The world of the stage lights, and the world where he simply longed for a decent, undisturbed sleep, free from startling awake in the middle of the night. Those who worked closely with him recounted that whenever he left the rehearsal stage, Michael would often pause for a few seconds, as if trying to regain his balance. Not out of weakness, but because his body had been stretched for too long, too deeply. One evening, a crew member recalled seeing Michael sitting alone at the end of a corridor, his head resting against the wall, his hands clenched, as if trying to gather the last bits of strength to move on. They didn't dare ask, didn't dare approach.
Man, that take a lot of
They watched
energy
him from a
performing in
distance,
front of
like a
hundreds of
man
thousands of
desperately
millions of
trying to
people,
hold
bro,
on to
every day.
himself.
That take energy, bro.
That was a moment
You
that
gotta give
haunted
yourself
many
to the world
because they
every day.
realized Michael was
Come
far
on,
from
bro.
okay, even though outwardly he still smiled, spoke, and rehearsed like a warrior. What made everything even more convoluted lies in an inescapable truth. Michael suffered from prolonged insomnia. This is not a rumor. It is a condition recorded in the legal documents that followed. Many recounted that he had nights where he was practically wide awake, just sitting and gazing out the window. A trusted assistant once described the scene of Michael speaking in a voice soft as a breath. "I can't rest." Though it is only a verbal account, it aligns with the context, with what was verified, creating a picture that chokes the listener. It was that severe lack of sleep that made his emotions more fragile and hypersensitive. His anxieties were pushed to a difficult-to-manage level. Sometimes he perceived things that others didn't. Not hallucinations, but the shadows of pressure. A feeling that someone was always ready to push him down the moment he faltered. Many crew members described Michael as being extremely vigilant at times. Upon entering a room, he had to check if the door was closed, if the curtains were drawn. One person overheard him whisper, "I feel unsafe." No document records this, but it is the kind of phrase that one cannot spontaneously invent because it perfectly matched his state at the time. Tired, sleep-deprived, and surrounded by responsibility. When the pressure reached its zenith, a phrase began to resonate like a vague omen. "They're trying to kill me." This time, the statement appeared in a stranger, deeper context. A member of the entourage recounted that one night, Michael called them into his room, asking for nothing specific, only wanting someone to stand beside him for a moment. Without saying much, he just looked down at his hands, then uttered a sentence that was half sigh, half unloading of his accumulated fear. "They are trying to push me to the wall." While there is no confirmed evidence, this recounted statement chills the spine of anyone who hears it because it aligns with the entire sequence of events surrounding him. A person suffering from relentless insomnia, choked by pressure, forced to move in a vortex that cannot be stopped, can easily perceive everything around them as a trap.
Everybody want that type of
The
clout until
entertainment
they get to
community
that
during
point.
this
Niggas,
period
everybody
had
have to try to
another
get you,
rumor,
nigga. That's a
seemingly
fact.
strange, yet believed by
Everybody
many.
want that type of, oh,
It
look
was
at us.
said that Michael
Nigga,
felt an
you know how
invisible
many
system
ops you gonna
was
have, nigga?
compelling him to return to the
Millions,
stage
nigga. You don't
at
know
any
these
cost.
motherfuckers rape. Nigga fuckers
There
is
was
mad
no
at you.
specific individual in that
You don't
rumor,
know these
no
niggas. They just
evidence to
mad,
point
bro.
fingers. Only a shared feeling that he was caught
Everybody
up
trying
in
to
a
get you out
plan
the paint.
too large, too
Everybody trying to
heavy
put money on
for an
your head,
artistic
nigga.
soul to bear. Outsiders saw it as a historical opportunity, yet he, at times, viewed it as the only door leading to freedom, but a door that was unlocked and always open towards more pressure. The drama of this chapter lies in the fact Michael was not an ordinary person. He was sensitive in a way that only souls living in art could understand. He felt everything with his whole being. This made the prejudices surrounding his origins even more burdensome. Despite being honored, he still had to confront the harsh scrutiny from places that some insiders described as not truly embracing. No one spoke it aloud, but it was an underlying force, smoldering like a long shadow. For a person who had endured so much pain since childhood, that shadow was enough to keep him in a constant state of defense. The paradox is, the more tired he was, the more he was required to be strong. He was called an icon, but icons are rarely allowed to be weak. So Michael had to grit his teeth and endure, stand tall under the lights, and keep his voice steady in long meetings. But after the boardroom door closed, he would again have to lean against the wall as if the entire world would collapse if he let go. A member of the tour's medical team once shared that the nights Michael struggled to sleep often became small storms backstage. No one wanted to speak of it, but everyone knew that if he couldn't rest, the next day would be fraught with risks. They called it internal business. They said it shouldn't leak out, but when everything converged, it became a crucial piece of the tragedy, a piece that makes anyone who looks at it feel choked. It was precisely in this period that the industry secrets began to be exposed in a way no one wanted. Not dark secrets, but the painful, bare truth. The entertainment industry is no place for frailty. When you are tired, they tell you to rest for a moment, but the schedule still moves forward, cold as steel. When you are sleep deprived, they tell you to try a little harder, but the financial pressure is still relentlessly close behind. These things are not wrong in terms of procedure, but they are catastrophically wrong when placed on the shoulders of someone who was already so fragile inside. And that is when the phrase, "they're trying to kill me," was no longer a whisper. It became an obsession. Not an obsession about anyone specific, but about the feeling of gradually being pushed beyond the realm of endurance. A form of spiritual exhaustion that no one saw, but that made the heart recoil. A form of solitude that made the shadow behind him grow longer each day. This chapter concludes here at the moment Michael stood right at the brink of emotional collapse, where a single small impact would be enough to make everything crash down. What awaits beyond these echoes will only be revealed.
I wonder who got all
in the
his
next part.
the rights of over all his shit.
That evening, the atmosphere in Michael's private room was so heavy that just stepping in was enough to feel a sense of profound unease hovering somewhere. No one said it, but everyone sensed the intense strain that enveloped him in those final days. The rehearsal schedule was suffocatingly dense.
People making fun of this nigga, not knowing this nigga was going through some shit, nigga.
But most
you know how hard it is
were his eyes. They had
when you
dulled in
lose
a
your
way
whole
that
skin
made
color.
others
You gotta
want to
look like
reach out and
what you
hold
look
on to
like.
him.
That's not who you are.
Michael didn't say
you gotta
much,
live life,
but
and
his
people talking
silence
shit
spoke
about
more
you, saying
clearly
this
than
and
any
that.
words.
You did this and this.
That was the time
Like,
he
bro,
looked to
Mike
his
was going
personal
through some
physician
shit, nigga.
as the sole lifeline to secure a rare
And
moment
like,
of
yeah,
rest.
it's lit at first, like
Legal records
all the
later
odds, but then
confirmed
it
that
started getting
Dr.
like,
Conrad
damn.
Murray
It's like,
administered a powerful
it's more
sleep-inducing
than motherfuckers
medication
just talking about
to
it. They
help
trying to
him
take me
settle
out
down. That
and
is an
take who I
undeniable
am as a
fact.
person and
But in that
refinance
moment,
me.
no one saw it as dangerous because Michael was too exhausted to think any other way. He was simply seeking a means to close his eyes for a while without being awakened by anxiety. Many recounted that even in the final rehearsals, Michael sometimes stood silently on the stage as if trying to maintain equilibrium with his own self. Once he braced his hands on the back of a chair, breathing heavily, then smiled as if to assure everyone that he was fine. But his eyes did not lie.
Keep it up, man.
They were clouded, weary, filled with a subtle, unnamed fear. Someone from the crew later recalled and said they wished they had understood better so they could have pulled him out of that cycle, even for a moment.
These niggas wasn't gonna pull him up
But that
out of the cycle.
cycle
They all
had
trying to
gone
get
too
money on
far.
to keep their spot and not trying to lose
The
but
night
who they
before
are
the
as a person.
tragedy,
Mike, that's
according
what
to official testimony,
people around him would
Michael
cancel that
again
nigga.
struggled to sleep. He paced in his room, sometimes stopping before the mirror as if to ask himself, "How much longer can I endure this?" That question was unheard by anyone, but every close associate
But this nigga
described
lived a
his
full
gaze
50-something
as that
years,
of a
nigga.
man wrestling
He
with
lived a
the
better life than
invisible
half these
shadow
motherfuckers, man.
clinging to his
No
back.
cap. Niggas
That
who lived
shadow
100 years
wasn't a
old, he lived a
specific
better
shape.
life than a lot of
It was the
motherfuckers.
accumulation of pressure,
He lived a whole life.
expectation, professional obligation,
This nigga lived,
physical fatigue,
if you
and
talking about his
lifelong
career,
emotional injuries.
this nigga lived for 200
A
years.
rumor
In 50
circulated
years, bitch.
backstage that a few hours before that evening, Michael had told someone
Nigga
close to him,
traveled around the whole
"They're trying
world.
to kill me. Everything is too much." Someone recounted this. There is no proof, no recording, but it sent shivers
We
through
got the
everyone
recording,
because
though,
it
in the
aligned with
beginning of
his
the video.
entire
So we
state
be
at the
looking,
time.
nigga. This
It
proves it
wasn't
all
that
that
he
they were trying to
believed
kill him.
someone
We got the
literally
proof.
wanted to
He was
harm
talking
him,
to Epstein.
but he
They
felt
showed
as
it.
though all the pressure, all the links in the system were pushing him to his ultimate limit, a limit too narrow to breathe. Conrad Murray, in his later testimony, admitted that he administered the special sleep aid because Michael pleaded for it, because he was overcome by exhaustion. This is the truth. But when placed in the context of Michael's psychological state at the time, the story is no longer just one sleepless
This
night.
is it.
It is the culmination of months of struggling with his body, his soul, and an industry that refused
Man, I
to
remember I
allow
was a
him to
kid,
slow
man. We
down,
listened to this on
even
the
for a
radio.
single day.
His last
A
music,
detail
I'm
few people
as a
know.
kid, I'm like,
According
damn,
to an account from a tour
Mike's
member,
still
a
alive.
few days prior, Michael had a brief conversation
I'm a
with them
little
about
kid. He's one of the
solitude.
greatest singers of all
Not
time.
a
He's still
lengthy
alive.
confession,
What the hell?
but just a sentence that
And
escaped
then nigga
when he
died.
turned
Like,
toward
damn.
them, his voice so weak it
It's
seemed
kind
to
of crazy,
dissolve
man.
into
We
the
little
air.
kids knowing that this kid was
I am afraid of
Michael
the
Jackson was
things
the
I
best
cannot
ever to do
see.
it in the world
That
of all
sentence, in
time.
retrospect, sounds like his own
We get to
prophecy.
witness and hear him
A
in
man
real
who
life.
had
I got
lived
to
too
see him in
long
real life.
in both the light
But
and
not
the
like
dark
in person,
to know
but
that
you
the
feel me?
most terrifying
A lot of
things
people only get to
are
see
not what is seen,
videos.
but what silently gnaws from within. That night, when Dr. Murray entered the room, Michael was nearly depleted.
They used to play his
He
songs on
tried to
radio
say a few
24/7.
words,
After he died, they
attempted
stopped
a
playing his
smile,
songs.
but that smile was faint as a
Trip.
dying breath,
They
like a
stopped
person
playing his
trying
songs
to
when he
encourage
died.
himself.
On the radio, they used to play
No
his songs
one
on the
but
radio
they
all the time
knew
before he
what
died.
happened
When
the
he
moment
died,
the
after
door
This Is
closed,
It, they stopped
but the
playing his songs. It was
investigation
over.
records
They stopped playing
confirmed
him.
that
We stopped
Michael
talking. They
was
stopped talking about
administered
him.
aid to help him
They
sleep.
stopped showing about him. They
It
had
was
this whole
just that
big
night.
brouhaha about it,
Everything
but then
slipped
after
out
that,
of
it just
control.
yeah.
The most heart-wrenching thing is not what happened next, but the feeling that he had sensed it beforehand. The fragmented words about his fear. The outburst, "They're trying to kill me," as a natural reaction to being pushed to the extreme by pressure. The moments he stood in the rehearsal room with eyes that no longer held their former spark. All of it pieces together into a poignant, tragic picture of an artist fighting against the very vortex the world had created for him. That night, Michael's stars didn't extinguish immediately. They flickered, trembled, as if trying to hold on to the last vestiges of the gentle life he had lost long ago. The irony is that what he needed was simply rest.
The baby
But that
bottle
was precisely what the industry, the pressure, and his exhaustion would not permit him
When
to
Michael
have.
Jackson was a little kid,
And
man.
then,
At
as
that
the
point,
dawn of the
man,
next day crept into the room,
he realized
nothing
a
was
nigga, a
ever
lot of
the
niggas ain't
same.
gonna even fathom.
The morning after that night, full of unease, the world awoke to a heavy,
I'm mad at them
profound
fake ass
silence.
kids. Them not even his kids,
Michael's
nigga.
music
I
still
hope they didn't
echoed
get all the
somewhere,
goddamn money out
but
of
it
nigga.
no
Cause them
longer
niggas,
carried
them
its
kids weren't
former
even his
joy.
fucking kids, nigga.
It resembled
They were
an
using
echo
Michael
from a
Jackson,
place
man.
everyone was familiar with, but had never truly examined. A place where a man had spent his entire life shining for others, but failed to
Them little
find a
kids that
light
had no
gentle enough
talent.
for himself.
They had no
Family,
legacy. They already
crew,
known for being
friends,
Michael Jackson's
each
fake
person
kids,
carried a
nigga.
shared feeling. They should have understood him more. They should have paused for a moment.
I don't even know if
Deeper
Michael Jackson
into the
had
weary
any real
eyes he
kids
tried
out
to
there. He
conceal
might got like a
beneath
kid
makeup,
out there who
and a smile.
we don't know about.
But life
You know
doesn't
what I'm
operate
saying?
on
But
if-onlys,
them kids were not
and
his
the
kids,
entertainment
though.
industry certainly doesn't have
Them
time to
little
stop
other
for
kids, them
anyone,
was like
even a legend.
they were using him.
When the official news broke, people began to look back at everything, piecing together the fragmentary details of his final months. The prolonged rehearsals, the moments Michael stood silently on stage, the broken phrases someone overheard. "They're trying to kill me." All of it returned as if he had tried to warn the world that he was not okay. Not in a literal sense, not about a specific force, but the feeling of being overwhelmed, of being pushed to the limit. That phrase became a dark note in his final symphony, a note that the more the listener scrutinized, the more painful it felt. There were sudden, overwhelming rumors that followed from people who had never even met Michael. They spoke of industry secrets, talked about mysterious things behind the
One of
scenes.
the goats, man.
But the truth is that no one could prove
They
anything.
couldn't till
The
now.
industry secret Michael had to face wasn't something mystical. It was simply
Until
the
now,
naked
the
truth.
Epstein files done
The
got
entertainment
released.
industry
Everything
can
done got
elevate you
exposed.
like a
Michael Jackson
deity,
didn't do a
but
damn
it is
thing.
also
He was helping the
powerful enough to
kids,
spin you in their vortex
and
until
then
you are utterly spent.
they were trying to take him
The
out.
detail few people tell, but Michael's loved ones gently mentioned. From childhood, he always had to prove his worth, not just with his talent, but to a world full of prejudice. Though his success was unparalleled, Michael still lived with a vague sense that he had to try much harder than others to be seen fairly. A person once close to him said, "Michael was fragile inside. He was acutely sensitive to every eye around him." That phrase was repeated often later on, like a key to explaining the anxieties he carried until his final night. And then, in the days that followed, his music became the only way the world could say goodbye. People played his old songs,
Man, they
rewatched
tossed this
rehearsal
nigga side
videos,
to the side
listened
like a
again
crushed
to the
up honey
segments
bun, bitch.
where he spoke and laughed with his crew. A choreographer who worked with him recounted that when they re-examined the This Is It footage,
Like
they
a
saw
used
something
up
in
Capri
Michael they hadn't
Sun,
grasped
nigga.
before.
They took that
It was
nigga
the
out.
image of a man straining to illuminate everything around him, while the very flame within him was slowly dying out. The most significant point is that after everything, Michael was no longer just the story of a weary artist. He became an emblem of a life that was both brilliant and deeply scarred. A man who had to stand at the intersection of adoration and pressure, of love and expectation, of light and shadow. Every article, every report, every recollection recounted afterward revolves around the same question that no one dares to answer directly. Did the world ever truly understand Michael Jackson?
Nope.
His pain was not loud.
Everybody thought it was a game, nigga. Well, people probably knew it. They can't do nothing about it, nigga. We can't do nothing about it.
It came from years of continuously having to validate his existence, continuously having to stand before countless scrutinizing eyes because he grew up in a community that had suffered profound inequity. Though he rose above everything, achieving success beyond any boundary, those lingering effects never vanished. They merely hid beneath the stage lights, waiting for the moment he was weakest to surface and seize his heart.
Yep.
The world mourned him as they would an old friend. But the most painful realization is that in retrospect,
nobody really knew
people
him.
recognized Michael had been trying to speak out in his own way for a very
Nobody really
long
knew
time.
Michael Jackson, man.
The quiet
We only saw
phrases,
the
the
entertainment
long
side of him.
silences, the subtle glance back when leaving a
And
meeting,
the lies they told
all
about
are
him.
like the traces of a soul struggling to find a way out. The day he departed from the lights, people began to call him a legend. But for those who understood the story behind it,
They was calling him
that
all
title
types of
carried
names.
both pride and profound sorrow. Because to become great, Michael sacrificed more than ordinary people could ever imagine. Sleep, peace, childhood, and even the belief that life would be gentle with him. His legacy is written in the most dazzling
This
light,
nigga didn't get to
but
have
it
no
is
rest,
also
nigga. As
imbued
soon
with
as
the
he
deepest
died, they
shadow.
took him out. As soon as he
And
almost
then,
about to end,
after all is
they
said
took him
and
out.
done, when Michael is mentioned, people will remember not only his voice or his dance, but also a phrase that carried a heartbreaking solitude. They're trying to kill me. It doesn't matter whom he was referring to or what he was referring to.
You know who
That
they
phrase
is.
has become the symbol of a soul too sensitive, too weary, yet trying to stand strong until the very last second. Michael is gone, but his story, with all its light and shadow, will remain for a long time as a reminder that no legend is forged from mere glory. There are stars that can only shine with such blazing intensity when they have already begun to shatter from within. In conclusion, the story of Michael Jackson is not just the journey of a legendary artist, but also a stark reminder of the price sensitive souls must pay when caught in the whirlwind of expectation and the light that is too blinding. From the phrase, "they're trying to kill me," to the moments he strained against the invisible pressure, we see clearly a man who fought to keep his heart intact in a world that never stopped demanding. While the mysteries surrounding him still linger, the most vital takeaway is the profound understanding for the solitude he carried throughout his life. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe to continue accompanying us on.
Shout out to the Daily Cut Hollywood 20 critical mistakes Dr. Mary made in Michael Jackson, final moments.
To one of our other big stories, the King of Pop has died. June 25th, 2009. The day the music died. The world wept for the King of Pop, believing his death was a tragic medical accident. But was it? Or was it an execution? For over a decade, the narrative has been controlled, but buried files and Dr. Murray's own contradictions expose a different reality. We're about to walk you through the 20 bloody truths of Michael Jackson's final night. Details that paint a picture of negligence, betrayal, and a timeline that just doesn't add up. You think you know the story. You have no idea. Stay with us until the very end, because truth number 20 changes everything. Before we can dissect the bloody, minute-by-minute timeline of the execution, we must first understand the volatile stage upon which this tragedy played out. To view Michael Jackson's death simply as an accidental overdose is to miss the colossal machinery that was crushing him from all
they just don't want to
sides.
look into to see what's
By
really
June
happening.
2009,
These motherfuckers don't be
Michael
giving
was
a fuck about
not
niggas,
just a
man.
human
You know what I'm
being.
saying?
He was a
They be acting like
corporation,
they care about people.
a
These niggas
heavy
don't be caring about people, man.
liability,
These people
and
be
a
fake.
desperate man fighting a losing biological war against his own physiology. The context begins with the This Is It residency. These 50 shows at the O2 Arena in London were billed as his final curtain call. But behind the glitter and the posters, the reality was grim. Michael was reportedly hundreds of millions of dollars in debt.
Yeah, that's what
He
we
needed
heard.
these shows not just for his legacy, but to
Yeah,
secure the
they was
financial
taking all his
future of his
goddamn
3
money on.
children and to save himself from bankruptcy. The pressure from the promoters, AEG Live, was monumental.
They was taking all his
He was
shit.
told in no uncertain terms that if he could not perform, he would lose everything he had left, including his beloved music catalog. Physically, the King of Pop was deteriorating. Those closest to the production
He
whispered
couldn't
about his
continue,
erratic
man. They was taking
behavior.
all his
He
money
was
off,
frail, visibly underweight,
fucking over
and
his
often
career, his
cold to the
image,
touch.
nigga. They were trying
But
to
his
end
most
this nigga, bro. They
terrifying
did.
enemy was not the physical
When
exhaustion.
he got out, he
It
gonna do
was
a
his
tell-off story.
inability to sleep.
I know he was.
We are not talking about simple restlessness. Experts later testified that Michael had gone arguably 60 days without real REM sleep.
Damn.
He was suffering from total chronic insomnia. He was terrified that if he didn't sleep, he would lose his voice, his energy, and his ability to dance. He believed that without sleep, the tour would collapse, and his life would effectively be over. This desperation brings us to the second key player, Dr. Conrad Murray. To understand the execution, you have to understand the executioner. Murray was not a sleep specialist. He was a cardiologist. He was not an expert in addiction or anesthesia. He was hired for one specific reason. He was willing to do what other doctors refused to do. Murray was being paid a staggering $150,000 a month to be Michael's personal physician. But this paycheck came with a deadly implicit condition: keep the star functioning, no matter the cost. Murray was compromised. He was in deep financial trouble himself, facing mounting debts, unpaid child support, and the risk of foreclosure on his home. He needed this job desperately. This created a lethal power dynamic. Murray wasn't an authority figure telling a patient no. He was a frightened employee terrified of being fired.
Yep.
When Michael demanded relief, Murray didn't prescribe therapy or safer alternatives. He reached for the anesthesia. The relationship between the two had become clinically toxic. Michael had developed a dependency on propofol, a powerful surgical anesthetic used to knock patients out from major invasive operations. In a hospital, propofol is administered by an anesthesiologist with a team of nurses, continuous heart monitoring, and emergency resuscitation equipment on standby. Michael, however, referred to this dangerous white liquid simply as his milk. He believed it was the only thing that could switch his brain off. For the 6 weeks leading up to that final night, Dr. Murray had been administering propofol to Michael intravenously almost every single night. Let that sink in.
They gonna pay that nigga the
For
millions.
6 weeks,
I'm pretty sure he
Michael
got paid
Jackson
after Michael
wasn't
Jackson died,
sleeping
man. I
in
know
the
he got paid
biological
after he
sense.
died, bro.
He was being
There ain't no
chemically
damn way.
induced into a coma and then
He
resuscitated in the
secret for
morning
so
to go
long.
to work. The master bedroom at 100 North Carrollwood Drive had been transformed into a makeshift, unregulated hospital room. It was littered with
Where is he
oxygen
at now?
tanks,
Where the doctor at
IV
now? Why he ain't
stands,
speaking up
saline
now?
bags, and
You know
vials
what I'm
of
saying? 'Cause they put that
sedatives.
nigga on the
But
clause. He can't
crucially,
speak,
it was
nigga.
missing the standard
Trip.
monitoring equipment required to keep a
Just
patient
like that,
safe under deep sedation. There were no
Kanika
alarms,
Jenkins.
no backup personnel,
Her mama was
and
saying
no
that they
safety
signed a deal that
protocols.
she can't speak.
Now let's look at the overview of that
Cause they paid her
specific
so much
night,
money on to shut the
June
fuck up.
24th into the early morning of June 25th. The atmosphere was charged with a strange mix of hope and dread. Michael had just returned from a rehearsal at the Staples Center. Witnesses, including the tour director, Kenny Ortega, said that on this particular night, Michael was actually brilliant. He was sharp, engaged, and optimistic, finally seeing the show come together. He performed Earth Song and Thriller with an energy they hadn't seen in years. But this adrenaline was a double-edged sword. He arrived home around 1 a.m. wired. His mind was racing, replaying the choreography and the music notes. He was physically exhausted, but mentally hyperactive. He knew he had to be back on stage the next day. The terror of insomnia began to set in. He retreated to the sanctuary of his bedroom, where Dr. Murray was waiting. The dynamic in that room was suffocating. On one side, you had the most famous man on the planet begging for unconsciousness so he could save his career. On the other, you had a doctor who was tired, distracted, and acting without a safety net. Murray didn't start with the propofol immediately. As we will see in the detailed timeline, he spent hours trying to sedate Michael with a cocktail of other benzodiazepines, Valium, Ativan, Versed. He was feeding a chemical fire, layering respiratory depressants on top of one another in a frantic attempt to shut Michael's brain off without using the heavy stuff. But nothing worked. The King of Pop lay awake, tormented, watching the clock tick closer to sunrise. Murray, exhausted himself and fearing the wrath of a sleepless superstar, eventually made the fatal calculation. He decided to give Michael what he wanted. He decided to administer the propofol on top of the cocktail of drugs already swimming in Michael's bloodstream. It was a recipe for disaster written in pharmacology textbooks, a lethal synergy of sedatives administered by a cardiologist who was out of his depth. The stage was set not for a medical procedure, but for a slow-motion execution. The This Is It tour would never happen. Instead, the world was about to witness the final, lonely performance of a man trapped in a room with a doctor who had lost his moral compass. To understand exactly how this night spiraled from a request for sleep into a homicide investigation, we have to look at the hidden details. We have to look at the lies. We have to look at the 20 bloody truths. And now, the most critical chapter. We are going to step inside that bedroom and clarify exactly what happened that night, reconstructing the horror based on classified documents, court transcripts, and the sworn testimony of witnesses who were there.
We are not
But before we unlock
nigga.
these doors, make sure you have subscribed to the channel. Your support is
Play
the
with us,
only
nigga.
way we can keep digging up the cold cases and uncomfortable truths that the mainstream media ignores. Hit that red button now and let's uncover the reality. Here are the 20 bloody realities of Michael Jackson's final night, arranged from gross negligence to calculated self-preservation, ending with the mystery that suggests this wasn't an accident, but an execution. The unregulated hospital room. The first shocking reality is the setting itself. When paramedics eventually arrived, they didn't walk into a celebrity's bedroom, they walked into a medical crime scene. Dr. Murray had set up IV stands and oxygen tanks, creating a makeshift surgical suite. Yet the most critical piece of equipment was missing. There was no pulse oximeter with an audible alarm attached to Michael's finger. In any hospital, if a patient stops breathing under anesthesia, a machine screams to alert the doctors. In Michael's room, there was only silence. Murray was flying blind, administering lethal drugs without the most basic safety net to warn him if Michael's heart stopped. Severe dehydration. Autopsy reports later revealed a disturbing physical detail. Michael was severely dehydrated. His body was frail and his veins were collapsed, making it incredibly difficult to find an injection site. Why is this critical? Because a dehydrated patient reacts more violently and unpredictably to sedatives. The concentration of drugs in the blood spikes higher when there is less fluid to dilute them. Murray knew this, yet he continued to pump chemicals into a system that was already physically crashing. The 1:30 a.m. Valium failure. The timeline of toxicity began at 1:30 a.m. Michael complained he couldn't sleep. Instead of refusing and enforcing sleep hygiene, Murray administered 10 milligrams of Valium. Valium is a muscle relaxant meant to soothe. It didn't work. Michael was tossing and turning, his anxiety spiking about the rehearsals, his mind unable to shut down. The 2 a.m. polypharmacy. Just 30 minutes later, with the Valium failing to induce sleep, Murray made a dangerous choice. He injected 2 milligrams of lorazepam, Ativan. This is where the concept of polypharmacy comes in, mixing drugs.
That
Combining
nigga risked his whole life to tell us
Valium
the truth.
increases
What's
the
really
risk of
going on, man?
respiratory depression significantly. Michael was still awake, but his breathing was already being compromised. The 3 a.m.
God won't let
midazolam
stuff like
injection.
this happen. Like
An hour
go
later,
away
Michael is
unjust,
frantic.
man.
The
You know what I'm
drugs
saying?
aren't working. Murray administers 2 milligrams of midazolam, Versed. This is a powerful drug often used before surgery to induce amnesia and sedation. Now, Michael has 3 different benzodiazepines swirling in his system. His body is fighting a chemical war between adrenaline and heavy sedation. The panic of sunrise. It is now near dawn. The birds are beginning to chirp outside the window. Reportedly, this sound drove Michael into a panic because it meant the sun was coming up and he hadn't slept yet. At 5 a.m., desperate to pacify his patient, Murray administers another 2 milligrams of lorazepam. The chemical load is becoming toxic. The 7:30 a.m. chemical layering. Michael is still conscious, still pleading for relief. At 7:30 a.m., Murray injects another 2 milligrams of midazolam. By this point, any ethical doctor would have stopped. Murray was simply layering depressants, creating a biological time bomb.
Nigga overdose
He
off
was
a little
treating
shit,
the
nigga.
anxiety,
You
not
know
the
what I'm saying?
patient.
I'll take it one
And in
bump of
doing
it.
so, he
You
was
over.
suppressing Michael's respiratory
Nigga,
drive
this
to
nigga
dangerous levels.
nigga,
The fatal milk ultimatum. At 10:40 a.m., Michael makes the request that would end his life. He tells Murray, "Just make me sleep, no matter what. I need the milk." He was asking for propofol. Despite the cocktail of 5 previous sedatives already in Michael's blood, Murray yields. He ignores the contraindications. He ignores the lack of monitoring equipment. He prepares the propofol. The lidocaine mask. To mitigate the intense burning sensation propofol causes when entering the small veins of the hand, Murray mixed the anesthetic with lidocaine. This numbness masked the injection, allowing the drug to enter smoothly. It was the kiss of death hidden inside a painkiller, ensuring Michael wouldn't feel the lethal dose entering his system. The dosage lie. Dr. Murray claimed to police he only gave Michael 25 milligrams of propofol, a tiny amount, barely enough to keep someone asleep for 10 minutes. However, the toxicology report told a different, bloody truth. The levels of propofol found in Michael's liver suggested a massive infusion, potentially continuous. The math of Murray's testimony never added up with the body on the table. He lied to minimize his culpability. The abandonment. This is the turning point where negligence becomes criminal. After administering the most dangerous drug in medicine, Dr. Murray left the room. He told police he went to the bathroom for 2 minutes, but phone records expose this as a lie. He didn't just step out, he abandoned an anesthetized patient. The distracted phone calls. Records show that from 11:18 a.m. to 11:51 a.m., Dr. Murray was on his phone. He wasn't calling specialists, he was making personal calls. He was checking emails and handling his own business affairs regarding his practice in Texas. For nearly 45 minutes, while the king of pop was under the influence of a general anesthetic without a monitor, his doctor was chatting on the phone in another room, completely distracted. Silent asphyxiation. While Murray was on the phone, Michael stopped breathing. Propofol relaxes the muscles that control the lungs. Without the audible alarm we mentioned earlier, Murray had no idea. Michael suffocated in his sleep, his heart slowly giving out due to lack of oxygen, while his doctor was worried about trivialities in the hallway. It was a silent death.
I mean, Michael Jackson looked better black than when he looked white.
Murray re-enters the room around 12 p.m. He finds Michael not breathing. But here is the horror. Murray claims Michael was warm and had a faint pulse. However, paramedics later noted that Michael appeared to have been dead for quite some time. His skin was cool and blue. Murray's timeline of just finding him was likely a fabrication to cover up how long he had actually been away. The incompetent CPR. Murray panicked. He began performing CPR on the bed. Michael was on a soft mattress. Any first-year medical student knows you must perform CPR on a hard surface, the floor, to effectively compress the heart against the spine. By pushing on the soft mattress, Murray was doing absolutely nothing. It was a performance of saving a life, not an actual attempt.
Yeah.
The landline excuse. Murray claimed he couldn't call 911 immediately because there was no landline in the bedroom, and he didn't know the address of the house to tell the operator. This is absurd. He had been living there for weeks. He had his mobile phone in his pocket.
Like, bruh.
This excuse was a delay
Like,
tactic,
bruh, like, what are we
buying him
talking about,
time to
nigga?
think.
It's 2009, nigga. They got cell
Witnessing of
phones
the
and everything
children.
at that time, nigga. Come on,
In a
man.
move that
You ain't believing
prosecutors
in that
later
shit.
called cruel,
It's goofy.
Murray ran out and shouted
You
for
get paid
help.
$100,000
Michael's
a
son,
month, bitch.
Prince, and daughter,
Tell you ain't got no
Paris,
fucking
ran
phone.
upstairs.
Goofy.
They witnessed their father, lifeless, eyes open and fixed, with Murray frantically pumping his chest on the bed. The trauma inflicted on the children in those moments was used as evidence of Murray's complete loss of control and judgment. The cleanup before the call. This is the most damning reality of all. Evidence suggests that before the bodyguard called 911 at 12:21 p.m., Murray spent critical minutes cleaning up. He was seen gathering vials,
Anybody
IV
clean
bags,
up
and needles, and hiding
up
them
they
in a
shit
closet
is
in a bag.
they
He
fuck.
prioritized hiding the evidence
Yeah,
of
they
his
fuck.
malpractice over
And
calling
they
the
know we all
paramedics.
know the secret
Those
elite
wasted
delete.
minutes sealed
Secret
Michael's
delete.
fate. He was
They
protecting
doing this shit,
himself,
nigga.
not the patient. The IOU motive. Why did Murray do it? Why take the risk?
Cause
The
he knew he was
motive
gonna
is
get
purely
paid,
financial.
nigga.
Murray was in debt for nearly
Yeah.
$1 million in judgments and child support.
Damn.
If Michael didn't sleep, he didn't rehearse. If he didn't rehearse, the tour was canceled. If the tour was canceled, Murray lost his $150,000 a month paycheck. The Whataburger Monterey Melt is back.
Niggas ain't trying to lose
He killed Michael
$150,000
Jackson
paycheck.
not out of malice,
That
but
nigga
out
was
of
trying to do
greed,
everything
in
and do a
fear
lot
of
to
his
keep
own
the cash
financial
cow
ruin.
alive.
He pushed the drugs to keep the paycheck coming.
Yeah, he ain't trying to do anything to
The
keep the cash
secret
cow alive.
slit in the bag. The final, most chilling
Doctor the
truth.
gang goofy,
The autopsy and crime
Crip.
scene photos revealed a strange slit in the IV bag found at the scene. Experts argue this setup was designed to bypass the drip regulator, allowing the propofol to flow freely into Michael's arm like a broken faucet, a gravity drip. This suggests that Murray didn't just give a single injection, he set up a continuous flow of death and then walked away. It wasn't just negligence, it was a
Damn.
mechanism of execution left running while the executioner checked his voicemail. Michael Jackson didn't stand a chance against a doctor who turned a healing tool into a loaded gun. When we step back and look at the entirety of that final night, the picture that emerges is not one of a simple medical accident. It is a portrait of a slow-motion execution, fueled by greed, negligence, and a terrifying lack of humanity. Dr. Conrad Murray did not wake up that morning intending to kill the King of Pop, but his choices, made minute by minute, injection by injection, sealed Michael's fate as surely as a weapon would have. From the unregulated hospital room, to the lies about the timeline, and finally the unforgivable abandonment of a dying patient to make phone calls. The 20 truths we've uncovered today prove that Michael Jackson was failed by the very person sworn to protect him. He was a man trapped in a machinery that viewed him as a product first and a human being second.
So they probably told that
This
nigga,
Is
man,
It
shut the
tour
fuck up.
promised to be a celebration
We'll
of
pay
life,
you, take
but
your debt
instead,
away,
the preparations became a
and
death
you don't have
march.
to work for the rest of your day in
Michael
your
asked
life,
for
nigga.
sleep, but he was given a permanent silence. We hope this timeline has shed new light on the darkness of June 25, 2009. If you found this deep dive informative, please honor the effort by hitting the subscribe button and turning on notifications. We are committed to exposing the stories that the industry tries to hide, and we cannot do it without your support. And do not click away just yet. If you think the mystery surrounding Michael Jackson is chilling, you need to see what we've uncovered about another legend. Click the playlist on your screen right now to watch our investigation into the death of Bruce Lee, where martial arts legend Bolo Young reveals shocking details about what really happened to the dragon. The truth is stranger than fiction. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.
Alright, we back. So you see from here, bro, that a lot of times in this situation that we talk about, man, that's usually how a lot of famous people passes away from drug overdoses, or they get taken out by somebody and we don't know who did it and all this. Like, bro, we know that this was an inside job. We know the government, the leaks, the secret agents, whatever, had their hand all through this before MJ passed away. But we want to say, remember Michael Jackson for who he was and how the industry changed him, man. The industry changed him, man, and you know it's kind of sad how they try to end up making him broke towards the end of his career. But and we all gonna remember Michael Jackson for who he was. And shout out to the real Michael Jackson fans, and we out this bitch hood and outside, big crip in the game. That's our shit, man.
Hey, Dad, you know, dog, when we link up, dog, this shit be legendary. Even though this is instrumental, you the engineer on it, so Kodak everywhere.